Wow, California Governor Gavin Newsom, he's playing chess and really laying the groundwork for a presidential run in 2028. He kept his promise to appoint a black woman to replace Senator Dianne Feinstein, who died on Friday. But it was not the black woman many people thought. Many people actually thought it was initially going to be Congresswoman Barbara Lee, but then he decided that, well, he didn't want to appoint somebody who was running for the seat because it might be unfair to the other two members of Congress, which includes Congressman Adam Schiff and Congresswoman Katie Porter. Schiff is being backed big time by former Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So what did Newsom do? He appointed the president of Emily's List, Laphonza Butler, to the United States Senate. Now, Butler posted this on social media after the announcement. I'm honored to accept Governor Gavin Newsom's nomination to be U.S. Senator for a state I have made my home, and honored by his trust in me to serve the people of California and this great nation. Butler will serve as the crucial 51st vote for Senate Democrats, who have a slim majority in the upper chamber and are defending several seats in red states in 2024. Vice President Kamala Harris plans to swear Butler in on Tuesday. Now, what's interesting is that Butler, of course, lives in Maryland with her wife and child, and so she is going to, I guess, what do they say, reclaim California as her home base. What's interesting here is that, and this is why Renita, why I think this is a quite interesting play. First and foremost, Newsom plans to run in 2028. Absolutely. Two, he appoints a black woman. He got a lot of criticism from Congresswoman Barbara Lee by going back on that. He comes back and appoints a black woman. Three, she leads Emily's List, which supports pro-choice candidates nationwide. That's a whole lot of money right there. Four, she's lesbian. So he's sitting here saying, I can check a whole lot of boxes. So what does it do? One, it isolates Congresswoman Barbara Lee, who's trying to run for the U.S. Senate. If Butler chooses to run for this seat, absolutely changes the game. And if you're former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, you ain't too happy, because if Butler does run, she can raise a lot of money. And who is Pelosi backing? Congressman Adam Schiff. So Newsom really just caused a lot of drama here because nobody had Butler on their list.
You know, you're right. This is going to be really, really interesting because of what you have here at play. You know, usually when a caretaker comes into a situation where a sitting elected official has died and it's a high profile position that we know that there would be a lot of competition for, what usually happens is there is a caretaker, which is somebody who comes and fills the rest of the term. And usually they make a public promise saying, I'm not going to run for the seat when we make it to the next election. And so we saw that here in Georgia when Congressman John Lewis passed away. There were many people who stepped up and said, I'm willing to be a caretaker. I don't ever want to serve in public office. I'm not going to run for the seat after taking care of it. I am just here as a placeholder to make sure that Democrats retain the power in this seat, but it is not my intention to sit in this seat. Now, that ultimately was not the process that Georgia went with to backfill Congressman Lewis's seat, but there was a lot of talk of that, and many people were in support of that. In this situation, you've got Laphonza appointed, but there are no stipulations on her not running for the seat in 2024. And so to your point, you're absolutely right. It sets up a few things. Number one, you've already got Barbara Lee in the race, who is well documented as someone that activists and organizers trust and someone that, you know, the people trust. And she has a long electoral track record of people just kind of knowing how she moves as an elected official and what she will or will not do, versus Laphonza, who's just coming from Emily's List as a president of Emily's List, which has a long and earned record of not supporting black women candidates. And that record did not change under Laphonza. In addition, as you mentioned, it was 24 hours ago, she still had her location, home base as Maryland on Twitter. So this is going to be very, very interesting for a lot of reasons should she decide to actually enter the U.S. Senate race.
I can't wait to hear what Julianne has to say.
Oh, Roland. You know, Gavin and I ran for the Board of Supervisors in San Francisco back in the 80s. He is a wily dude. He is very slick, and this shows his slickness to the max. The sister code is that black women don't talk about each other ugly when we're out in public. So nobody's going to say anything about Laphonza, no more than what Renita has said, which is mild. There's other stuff that can be said, not about her, but about the process. I stand with Barbara Lee. We stand with Barbara Lee. The California Black Women's Network stands with Barbara Lee. And we're profoundly disappointed in Governor Newsom because when this man had his chestnuts roasting on an open fire with a recall, black women pulled his chestnuts out and helped him. So how dare he ignore our voices? But again, the sister code says we don't talk about folks. So all we want to really know is what happened. Because if Laphonza decides to file, you're going to have a food fight. She does have enormous fundraising capability, both from Emily's List, and let's not forget, she was the head of SEIU in California. So she got labor, she's got the GBLTQIA community. She is a formidable force. But does she know the United States Senate? Does she know anything else? Many of us, I interviewed Kelly Todd Griffin, head of the California Black Women's Network this morning on my radio show. We're disappointed, but we're not going to diss a sister. But we are disappointed because Gavin needed us, and when he needed us, he leaned on us, and now he does not hear us. And that's the bottom line. He and Pelosi, but basically both want Adam Schiff. He's moderate, a middle of the road. They don't want a progressive, which would be either Katie, whatever her name is, or Barbara Lee.
Katie Porter.
Okay, I'm being myself. But anyway, they don't want them because they're too progressive. And so they really have lined up behind Schiff. And this is a way of basically bolstering Schiff, they thought. But this Laphonza sister may be time enough for them. And if she raises the money, she can upset the entire apple cart. So it's really interesting to see what's going to go down.
Congo.
So one of the other things I think is important to mention is that she's also 44 years old. And so when all of this talk about Biden and everybody being too old, he's, compared to Barbara Lee in terms of age and Schiff and others in terms of age, obviously Katie Porter's younger as well. This is also something that can help him going into 2028. And, originally he said that, he wanted to have somebody who didn't really have an interest in serving. But when he made the announcement, as Renita was saying, he didn't say that. So I think this is very strategic. And also she served as an advisor to Kamala Harris, and who also has her own presidential aspirations, I'm sure, for 2028. And so this is, there could be if she decides to say, hey, I'm pretty comfortable here, there could be a potential, Newsom Butler ticket. And, going to some of what Dr. Malveaux was saying as well, there are about like 12 other candidates who are running for Senate in California. And so this is another person who, if she decides to stay, it's also going to dilute the female vote overall, across all races as well. And so I believe that there are many people in California, particularly in the Black community, who are upset, who feel like, he disrespected, Barbara Lee and her legacy. But I feel like he's playing the long game. And this is going to lead to, she already has that national profile. And I'm very concerned with all of these outside California voices, people who aren't, familiar with what's going on, is just going to, because of the Emily List, because of the union background, because of all this, going to throw major support her way just because of that name recognition. So this is very strategic on Newsom's part. And I feel like those who support, Barbara Lee, people need to really hunker down and go hard, because if this is what we want, we got to make sure we fight for that. And Newsom ultimately does not control the votes that the Black people in California and more in California, in terms of the constituency that Barbara Lee has built, can bring to the table.
All righty. Well, I think it's going to be quite interesting here. And again, what people don't understand here, Anita, politics is politics. It ain't always nice. It ain't always clean. And again, if you're Newsom, we know exactly, we know where he wants to be in 2028. He will be able to say, when there were no black women in the United States Senate, I appointed one. So he's going to be able to say this will be the second, openly lesbian in the United States Senate. He wants to be able to say that. And so there's no doubt he's making calculated decisions for 2028.
Right. I think he's making a calculated decision, as you said, and I think that it is not going to have the effect that he thinks that it will have. I think that he's going to end up with more problems from doing this than what he thinks that he will gain. That's just my prediction. You know, what goes around comes around, and there are a lot of things in this situation that Dems have previously talked about in other states, where we had Herschel Walker basically living in Texas and trying to be the U.S. Senator for Georgia, and nobody liked it. So, I mean, there are a lot of things in this calculation that I think that he's miscalculated that people are not going to remember, because many of these things just happened yesterday. People didn't like it then, and they probably won't like it tomorrow.
All right.
You know, what goes around comes around.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, what goes around comes around. And Gavin thinks he's slick, and he is slick. But, you know, slick does not always win the day. He made 2 promises, and he kept them. He appointed a black woman. He said the caretaker thing to me was so insulting. We've been taking care of America since we've been here. So to say a black woman would be a caretaker, you know, what are we, mammy? But he did appoint someone who seems to have no dog in the fight. This sister is formidable, and it may come back to bite him in the hind parts.